Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Muhammad Ayub Siddiqui. I have done PhD in finance. Before PhD, I did MPhil from Quaid-e-Azam University in the subject of economics and BSc Honours Economics and MSc Economics from the International Islamic University, Islamabad. Since 1992, I am in the teaching profession and I've been teaching courses from different areas of specialization. Mostly my focus in the selection of courses and teaching and imparting the knowledge has been from the area of quantitative economics, finance, financial modeling, Islamic economics, Islamic financial system, and many other areas. Well, this particular course, which is titled as Monetary and Fiscal Framework in Islamic Finance, has been assigned the code MBF707. I will be your instructor in this course from the ComSats Institute of Information Technology Virtual Campus. I hope you will enjoy this course with me and we'll have a lot of discussion in this course. Let me now introduce the course. Our topics of discussion for today's lecture include introduction, significance of the subject of monetary and fiscal policy in Islamic perspective, and how Islamic perspective is different from the conventional perspective. Then the importance of economic models. I will introduce briefly what are the models and what are the economic models and how monetary and fiscal policy help us to deal with these economic models. This particular lecture will also review retrospect of Islamic financial system, which will give us brief review of the Islamic financial system from the perspective of monetary and fiscal policy. And then moving on to the next topic, we'll discuss some reconstruction arguments, particularly in the following 5 areas: as to the policy perspective in the Islamic economy, 2, the financial scene and the landscaping of the financial scene and the financial system, 3, the fiqh for the government. Fiqh for the government means what guiding principles are available in Islamic fiqh for the state. The policy goals in an Islamic economy, and then the policy goals in non-Islamic economy. This is brief introduction of the topics which we are going to discuss in today's lecture. This is the first lecture, therefore I will briefly introduce the subject, the fiscal and the monetary policy. Fiscal and monetary policies are the subset of public policies in economics and finance. When I say public policies, in economics, the word public is very commonly used for the government. So basically, the fiscal and the monetary policies come from the government policies of stabilizing economy, addressing various macroeconomic factors and policy objectives. Now, what is fiscal policy? Fiscal is the word emanated from fisc. And the fisc, the word fisc means treasury, and this treasury was very commonly known, and it has been derived from the Roman Empire. In Roman Empire, the word fisc was used for the management of the government treasury. Government treasury is not for the collection of revenues only. Obviously, when revenues have been collected, after the collection of revenues, there is very huge set of expenditures which are generally met through these revenues, which are collected by the government and the government policy makers and government machinery. So briefly we can say, if there is question of what is fiscal policy, the answer is, it is the policy of the government for the management of revenues which are collected by the government and their allocation for different projects, for different welfare projects, for different development projects, and for day-to-day consumption expenditures of the government. So in fiscal policy there are two parts. Number one, how revenue will be collected, from where revenue will be collected, and how much revenue will be collected, what will be the tax base, and what are the government corporations where these revenues will be collected, what will be the tax structure in the economy. And having debated the structure, when the taxes are finalized and the taxation system is implemented, the revenues later on are kept for, or they are allocated for the purpose of different expenditures. Now, what is on the expenditure side? On the expenditure side, there are two main heads: development expenditures and the non-development expenditures. Development expenditures include the projects, mega projects, small projects, for example, infrastructural development of the economy, establishment of industries on the part of the government, construction of bridges, dams, and so many other projects which are meant for economic development. And non-development expenditures, day-to-day expenditures of the government include non-development expenditures. And sometimes it is difficult to differentiate between the development and the non-development expenditures. For example, if the meetings of the government officials are for the framing and the development of the projects of the government, projects of the economy, of course these expenses make a major component or minor component of the fiscal policy. So now coming to the monetary policy. Dear students, since this lecture is an introduction, so initially we are discussing as to what is fiscal policy, what is monetary policy. It is just introduction. In the subsequent lectures we will discuss in detail how these fiscal policies are framed and how they are implemented, and from Islamic perspective what is to be added in the conventional fiscal and the monetary policy. Well, coming to the monetary policy, as is obvious from the name, monetary policy means the policy of the government for the management of money in the economy. Now, what is included in the monetary policy? The main items, the main components of monetary policy are quantity of money in the economy and the interest rate. These two are the major tools of monetary policy. So monetary policy is related to the management of money, and the objective is the economic development. Again, for example, if government is adjusting quantity of money in accordance with the real production. This is monetary policy. If there is imbalance between the quantity of money and the output produced in the economy, government needs to make adjustment through central bank of the country, because monetary policy is the subject matter of central bank of the country. Different economies have different central banks and they have different names. For example, in US economy, which is one of the largest economies of the world, central banking system is known as Federal Reserve, or in short Fed, F-E-D. Fed is used for the central bank of US economy. In Pakistan, State Bank of Pakistan, SBP, is central bank of the country, which is responsible for the management of monetary policy. Now, as far as quantity of money is concerned, the economists say and the financial experts suggest that there must be balance between the quantity of money supplied in the economy and the output produced in the economy. If there is imbalance, for example, if too many currency notes are chasing few goods in the economy, this is the situation of imbalance, and this imbalance ultimately creates inflationary situation in the economy, which is very dangerous. Sometimes it is also known as inflation tax. And the other tool of monetary policy, interest. Now, interest has different dimensions and different names depending upon the objective of and the type of interest. For example, discount rate is also used as a proxy for the interest rate. Now, how interest rate is used as a monetary tool? When interest rate is increased in the economy due to any reason, what happens? The cost of borrowing increases in the economy, and the investors are discouraged to borrow more from the financial system and make investment. As a result, the volume of investment is decreased. If volume of investment is decreased, the capital formation in the economy is disturbed. And this decreasing capital formation ultimately adversely affects the productive capacity of the economy. This is how monetary policy is important. On the expansionary side, if interest rate is decreased by different government or central banks measures, this is a motivating factor for the investor to borrow from the financial system of the economy and undertake investment to the maximum possible extent, so that the capital formation ultimately raises the productive capacity of the economy. So this is introduction of the monetary policy. Now the next point is monetary and fiscal policy in Islamic perspective, which is the subject matter of this course. Now, having briefly known fiscal policy and monetary policy, when we add the word Islamic perspective, it means while introducing monetary and the fiscal policy, we have to take care of the principles of Islam and the principles of Islamic fiqh or Sharia. So nothing can be launched with the name of fiscal or monetary policy which is against the Islamic principles. And number one. Number two, monetary and the fiscal policy cannot be used to pursue the objectives which are based on zulm. Zulm with one component of the society and beneficiary or luxury for another component of the economy. So when we say Islamic perspective, it means we have to take care of halal and haram. We must clearly understand the difference between halal and haram. What is halal? The objectives, the projects, the production, the welfare projects, which or any other economic activity which is launched that comes in the permissible avenues of Islam and Islamic Sharia. So if anything is against Islamic Sharia or Islamic perspective, that cannot be launched by the Islamic State. That is why the next point which I have listed here, it states very clearly this course revolves around the issues related to these two policies from the Islamic perspective. So now the question is, if a student is not clear about macroeconomic objectives, if the student has not studied fiscal policy, if student is not familiar with the monetary policy, definitely it will be difficult for such students to understand the fiscal and the monetary policies in Islamic perspective. I would therefore suggest such students who have not done any course in macroeconomics, they must read macroeconomics at the basic level, or they must buy the book of Principles of Macroeconomics and read it, because without understanding of the macroeconomic principles and macroeconomic texts, student cannot understand as to the Islamic perspectives of the monetary and the fiscal policy, which are major components of the macroeconomic activities. Well, moving to the next point, according to our outline of today's lecture, significance of the subject. How far fiscal and monetary policy is significant? How far it is important? Students, fiscal and monetary policies are very important policies of the macroeconomics. What is macroeconomics about? Just to review your concept and recast what you have already studied in the discipline of economics and finance. The macroeconomics is the study of economy as a whole, and it addresses many topical issues. I hope you must have studied, you must have at least heard about these topical issues which are covered in macroeconomics. Why we are discussing this? Because monetary and fiscal policy are the policies of the macroeconomy. So we must understand what is macroeconomy and what are the issues which are addressed in macroeconomy. For example, the questions which are generally raised in macroeconomy, and they are addressed either by fiscal policy or monetary policy, directly or indirectly, are: number one, why does the cost of living keep rising? What are the macroeconomic factors because of which a person who is earning the same amount of income over different period of time, his cost of living rises? When I say cost of living rises, it means his existing amount of earning, his existing amount of pay package does not provide him the same facilities as he was availing before. So suddenly what happens? The same amount of income which he continues earning does not purchase the same goods and services which he was purchasing before. Obviously, you can understand it happens because of the rising inflation, because of the rising prices of the goods and services. So how to manage these things? This is the subject matter of macroeconomics, and at the macro level, at the aggregate level, it comes in the subject matter of fiscal and the monetary policies. The second question, why are millions of people unemployed even when the economy is booming? Dear students, some of the students may have misunderstanding as to the growing or fastly growing economies. They must be thinking as if there is no problem of inflation, unemployment in the economies where economies are growing very fastly, where per capita income is high, where economic activities are fast. Definitely, growing economy adds value to the unemployed people by providing them employment opportunities. More industries are established, economic activities are fast, people can get jobs, and if they are unemployed, the unemployment is for the temporary period. But still, there are economies, for example, American economy, Chinese economy, Japanese economies. I am telling you names of the economies which are fastly growing economy, which are now included in the list of advanced economies. Over there even there is issue of unemployment. Now we need to understand why such an issue of unemployment rises in the economies which are in terms of per capita income rich, where economic activities are booming all the time. So this we need to understand. So if we want to understand, if you want to learn the answers to these questions, definitely this provides us significance of the subject which we will be studying during this semester. What causes recession? What is recession? Recession means when economic activities slow down, when people are unable to sell what they are producing, when industries start closing, when the unemployment start increasing. So when economic activities slow down, this is the situation of recession. The question is, what are the reasons? Why economic activities slow down? Is there any problem on the part of private sector? Is there any negligence on the part of the government policy makers? And if there is any problem, if there are circumstances because of which the recession is increasing, when the recession is set in, then how these problems can be resolved? How recession can be overcome? So what is the solution in terms of monetary and fiscal policy? This we need to answer in this question, in this subject. The next is, can the government do anything to combat recession? This I have already discussed. And should it? Now this is a very pertinent question. If government has got ability to combat recession, the question is it the responsibility of the government all the time? Should the government do the solution for the recession, or some other avenues also exist in the economy to resolve the issue of recessions? Then continuing with the significance of the fiscal and the monetary policy and the macroeconomy, the other questions include, what is the government budget deficit? I hope you know the difference, you know the meaning of budget deficit. What is budget deficit? It is simple difference between the government expenditures and the government revenues. This is direct subject matter of the fiscal policy. Now when I say difference, this difference can be positive. For example, the difference between revenues and the government expenditure. If revenues exceed government expenditures, this is the situation of budget surplus. But unfortunately, there are a few economies which enjoy a budget surplus. But most of the economies face budget deficit because expenditures of such economies exceed their revenues. Then how do they meet this budget deficit? Obviously, by borrowing from different sources, from internal sources or from the external sources. We will discuss in detail what are the external sources and what are the internal sources, and how Islamic economic system deals with the internal and the external sources of financing budget deficit. Then the next question which is pertinent, which also signifies the subject, how does it affect the economy? If there is persistent budget deficit means today we are facing budget deficit. Today Government of Pakistan's revenues are less than government expenditures, and even 10 years before, the Government of Pakistan was facing budget deficit, and this budget deficit sometimes increases, sometimes it decreases because of the government prudent policies, government good policies. Now the question is, if the deficit persists, what is the effect on the economy? Is it bad for the economy? Is it good for the economy? Under what circumstances it is good, and under what circumstances the budget deficit is not good? The next pertinent question is, why are so many countries poor? The causes of poverty. Is it because of the bad policies or bad implementation or bad governance, or some other reasons that poverty level does not decrease? Instead of decreasing, it is increasing, and it has also become a political issue. Some governments claim that they have halved poverty in Pakistan, and some governments later on claim that no, it was wrong. The poverty level was not halved. Poverty does exist, and it is a serious issue, and therefore the government managers, finance managers take the measures to combat poverty. Is there any solution in the framework of Islamic monetary and the fiscal policies? We will discuss in detail. What policies might help them grow out of poverty? Is there any prescription in the fiscal policy and the monetary policies from Islamic perspective? That is to be explored and discussed in this subject. Now let me show you some facts and figures in order to highlight the significance of the fiscal and the monetary policy in macro economy. Fiscal and monetary policies directly affect social well-being, and as I mentioned earlier, now they have also become a very important component of the politics of any country, including Pakistan. Students, if you look at the figures in this diagram, the blue fluctuating lines indicate unemployment rate, and the red fluctuating lines indicate the inflation. These are the figures from one of the advanced economies. you can see how inflation and unemployment go hand in hand. How do they affect each other and how do they move together? You can see, if you are familiar with the economic history, 70s was the period of shocks. Particularly, it was well known for oil shocks. Oil, being the blood of economy, created a lot of trouble when the oil producing and exporting countries took measures to restrict production of oil. So how this fluctuation, how these trend lines indicate how these oil shocks created the situation of inflation throughout the world, including this advanced economy. And then gradually it went down, but at the same time, when inflation is decreasing, the unemployment starts increasing. Now, why this relationship exists in the conventional system? Is there any solution in the Islamic economic system within the framework of monetary and fiscal policy? So that actually raises the significance of this course. So this indicates the importance of studying this course. What are the solutions in conventional framework and what is the resolution of this problem in Islamic perspective? Now, the general conclusion, if you look at the fluctuating line, the trend lines in the graph, the blue line indicating unemployment and the red line indicating inflation, clearly shows trade-off. Trade-off means the negative relationship between inflation and unemployment. So if government is trying to control the inflation, government has to confront with the issue of unemployment. On the other side, if government is trying to combat unemployment, there is inflation. Now, why does this happen? In the conventional system, this is known as Phillips curve relationship. You must be familiar if you have studied macroeconomics. So how do we handle such a situation in Islamic perspective? Now, having introduced very briefly the significance of the subject, raising a number of questions, and then giving the example of the relationship of unemployment and inflation, a very general question arises in my mind. How do economists, irrespective of Islamic or un-Islamic, how do economists solve the economic issues? Do they have some magic? Do they know some science to resolve macroeconomic issues, to answer the question which we have discussed earlier? What is the thing? I mean, what can be the single sentence to answer this question as to how economists solve their problems? The problems related to macroeconomy, when they have a number of policies in their hands, and two of them make the subject matter of this course. My simple answer is, by developing or making some economic models, the economists address the issues of the economy, the questions which we have raised earlier. Now, what is an economic model? Because if you are familiar with the economic model, only then you can understand, yes, this is the scientific way to solve the macroeconomic issues or to answer the questions which have been raised. What is an economic model? An economic model shows relationship of variables. And what are those variables? The variables which have been discussed in the questions in the earlier slides. For example, the question of unemployment. So unemployment is a variable. Inflation, the issue of inflation. What is inflation? The increase in general price level, inflation. So how to deal with inflation? Obviously there are some models are developed, and these models are called economic models. Now inflation is one of the variables. Similarly, the price level, investment, consumption, exports, imports, and then the variable of taxation, the variable of interest in the conventional economy, and the variable of return, the rate of return, the risks, the risk level, different types of risk, all these are variables. So what is an economic model? An economic model actually combines these variables in very systematic way. What is the systematic way? When logically the variables are put together in the form of an equation, then data is collected on these variables and policies are framed, and then we monitor the fluctuation in these variables. How do we monitor? There are different levels, different threshold values, different targeted objectives, according to which, with reference to which, the fluctuation in these macroeconomic variables is monitored. So if the fluctuation of the macroeconomic variables is in the right direction, we say we are moving in the right direction. We are achieving our objectives. Our policies in terms of monetary and fiscal are in the right direction. They are effective and we will be able to achieve goals. So, economic models, therefore, the single line answer is, it is economic model which needs to be developed in order to understand the issues and then in order to answer different questions which are raised. Obviously, this can be done by collecting data, by collecting information from the economy, and by studying the fluctuation in this data. The variable tell us their direction of movement. And then keeping in view the direction of movement, we suggest expansionary policies or contractionary policies. We will discuss in detail, dear students, what are the contractionary policies and what are the expansionary policies. These models explain the economic behavior. These models, that is why the equations which are included in these models, they are also known as behavioral equation. Why they are known as behavioral equation? Because if one macroeconomic variable is changing, we see how the other macroeconomic variable is responding. So the behavior of one is affecting the response of the other. So that is why sometimes the equations which make economic models are also known as behavioral equations. So most of the time in economics and finance, we deal with the behavioral equation. You must be familiar with the term, the title behavioral finance, which is new area or new invention in the area of economics and finance, behavioral finance. So all the behavioral financial subject deal with the behavioral equations, and these equations are estimated through collection of data, and then the policies are suggested and devised. Data also help us to forecast the future values of these macroeconomic variables. Just take the example, if GDP of an economy is increasing, the gross domestic product. Now, gross domestic product is the reflection of economic activities in the economy. If GDP is growing, that will indicate better performance of the economy. The real sector is growing, particularly when real GDP is increasing, the real sector of the economy is growing, the industry is putting its contribution in the national economy, the infrastructure is growing, it is helpful, the transport activities are faster, and the services sector is also contributing. For example, the banking, insurance, retailing, wholesaling, all these economic activities are contributing in the positive direction. That is why the GDP has increased. Now the question is, which sector is contributing how much and what are the reasons? That is the subject matter which is addressed in the economic models, and this relationship is estimated through economic models. In economics and finance, we have so many models. For example, if we relate risk and return with the help of an equation, given the assumptions related to these two variables, and we write an equation to show the relationship of risk and return, this is part of the economic model. This is part of the financial model. Similarly, when we relate interest rate and the volume of investment, this is part of the economic model. Investment is the response variable, interest is the source variable. So if interest rate is changing, the investment is responding. Similarly, in the stock market is also a reflection of the economic activities. So if stock returns are increasing, if stock market are giving positive returns to the investors, obviously the volume of investment in the stock market will increase. So instead of depositing money in the banks and the financial system of the economy, the investors prefer to buy stocks, go to the market, go to the stock market, undertake investment, buy shares, sell shares, earn capital gains. So this is how the models are developed. Obviously, what I am discussing, this is not something in the air. This is not something which we go on discussing and discussing. Mathematics, mathematical equations play a very significant role in the understanding of relationship of what I am explaining. Now, when we write the mathematical equations relating these macroeconomic variables, and then we suggest different policy prescription for the improvement of relationship of these variables, obviously this is done through models. This is done through models. You must be, if you are students of finance, pure finance, you must be familiar with the multi-factor model in finance. You must be familiar with capital asset pricing model in finance, which is shortly known as CAPM, CAPM, capital asset pricing model. Now, what does capital asset pricing model show? Now, there are two ways. Either we continue explaining in words or we write it in the form of equation. So if we use mathematics as a language to show our model, this is a refined version of economic or financial model. So generally, capital asset pricing model is written in terms of an equation, which is the individual stock premium equal to the systematic risk multiplied by the market premium. Now, what I am saying, this is actually part of a financial model. Now, what are the reasons why the expected return is different from the actual market return, and the interest rate. Now, all these things are related in a model, and model helps us to collect information on the variables which are intuitively part of this model and estimate the relationship, and then find out and then decide as to whether the model is applicable to our perspective or it is not applicable to our perspective. So if it is applicable, then what is the advantage? If it is not applicable, then what is the disadvantage or advantage of this finding? So in Islamic perspective, how such models are dealt. So coming back to the economic model, so we develop economic model, we discuss model, and then based on estimated models, values, we devise different policies to improve economic performance and the financial performance in our economy. This is all about economic models. Now, all the discussion so far has been mostly focused on conventional rather than Islamic. Now we are moving towards the Islamic financial system. I will share with you brief history of Islamic financial system, and this history I will not start from the period of the Holy Prophet ﷺ or pre-Islamic period, because that will be simply, although it is the need of the time that we should know, the students know what are the origins of Islamic financial system. Obviously, origin is the Holy Prophet ﷺ, his teachings, Quran and Sunnah. But we will focus on the history of implementation of Islamic financial system and the development of framework and the blueprint of Islamic financial system in Islamic world. That is why the heading of this slide is retrospective of the Islamic financial system. Now, in this retrospective, the very year of origin is 1976. This was the year when in Pakistan martial law was imposed, and then President of Pakistan was committed to implement and introduce the Islamic financial system in Pakistan. So Islamic economics formally took off in 1976, although in the Constitution of Pakistan 1973, Islamic financial system and its clauses were included. But formally, Islamic economics took off in 1976 with the first international conference on Islamic economics. And this international conference actually paved the way and opened the doors for the researchers to contribute in this very particular area of finance. The pioneers focused on themes that had an immediate practical relevance for the Muslim countries. There were deliberations, there were group debates, and in the group debates, the religious scholars were included, the economists were included, the financial experts, bankers, and the experts from insurance companies, and the experts from different parts of the world in conventional economics, in fiqh, in finance, in Sharia, all participated, and they contributed according to their utmost efforts and according to the extent of their sincerity. In the follow-up to the first conference, two seminars on the fiscal and the monetary policies were held, one in Makkah and the other in Islamabad, the federal capital of Pakistan. The proceedings of these seminars have been published by not only King Abdulaziz University, Jeddah, but some of them have also been published by Pakistani Institute of Policy Studies in Islamabad. What are the outcomes, or what are the general findings of these seminars which took place during mid-70s and then the late 70s? The Makkah seminar, 1978. The papers are available in the form of Monetary and Fiscal Economics of Islam, and this book has been edited by Muhammad Arif. Dear students, please note down these books, this material which I am sharing with you. Though the style is different from the classroom level, because in the classroom we list the textbooks, but for this particular course there is no single textbook. If you want to learn this area, this is practical area, please go through these texts which I am sharing with you, if you want to really learn this subject in Islamic perspective. Because this subject can be learned only through deep involvement. If you are not deeply involved, if you read it for the sake of examination, then perhaps this subject cannot be deeply known to you. So please, if you want to learn deeply this subject, please find out these books, this material which is now easily available. You can Google, you can search, even you can download from different websites which are now specific for Islamic finance. There are couple of companies in Malaysia. There are some institutions in Saudi Arabia, for example, Islamic Research and Training Institute, Islamic Development Bank, Jeddah, and so many other volunteers. So if you simply Google Islamic finance, you will come across this material. And this is how I have also collected the material. Now, coming back to the Makkah seminar. Now, the Makkah seminar produced a lot of material which was later on published. And in the form of book, Muhammad Arif published a book with the title of Monetary and Fiscal Economics of Islam. The main themes of papers which were presented at Makkah seminar, they included monetary policy. 3 research scholars, great experts from Islamic finance, edited these papers, and they contributed and they developed into a write-up which is titled as Monetary Policy. And these writers, these scholars include Siddiqui, second is Chapra, Dr. Umar Chapra. When I say Siddiqui, Dr. Muhammad Nijatullah Siddiqui from India, a great scholar. I would call him the Adam Smith of Islamic financial system. He holds the same position in Islamic economics and Islamic financial system as the Adam Smith holds in conventional system. Dr. Muhammad Umar Chapra, a Pakistani scholar, belongs to Karachi. He has spent the whole life in the development of Islamic financial system, Islamic economic system, and then Muhammad Arif, of course, a great scholar. Manzar Kahf, another scholar, he also contributed in terms of fiscal and monetary policies. Then Muhammad Uzair, central banking operations. If you are interested in specializing the banking operations, this is one of the best books. Salama, fiscal analysis of zakat. In Islamic in Islamic fiscal policy, or the fiscal policy in Islamic perspective, zakat is very important variable. Zakat plays significant role in the redistribution of income and then ultimately affecting the production capacity of the economy. We will discuss in detail later on in the subsequent lectures. Then comes Mahfouz Ahmad with his contribution with the title of Theme of Distributive Justice. So these are the masterpieces, because these are the scholars who contributed when nothing was available in very organized form. Even today, it is difficult to find comprehensive book in parallel with the conventional economic books. People are working, they are working diligently, and now a few books have been produced, and dear students, you can explore these books, you can search these books, you will find out these books to study. The second center of Islamic economic system, the center of seminar on Islamic economic and financial system, was Islamabad. As I mentioned earlier, in Pakistan, the period of President Ziaul Haq mostly focused on the development of Islamic economic system and its implementation. In Islamabad seminar, which was conducted in 1981, the contribution can be organized in this way: money and banking in Islam and fiscal policy and resource allocation in Islam. This book has been edited by Ziauddin Ahmad, Muhammad Iqbal, Munawar Iqbal, and Fahim Khan. Dear students, I want to share with you this thing with pride, that I have studied from these great scholars. They have been my teachers at International Institute of Islamic Economics, and when they were contributing, when they were developing this literature, I was direct student of these great scholars. I salute them, and I salute their great contribution in Islamic finance. The themes of these papers, the papers which were edited in the form of a book, and these edited papers were developed into different other books as well. The main themes included: Chapra contributed in terms of monetary policy, Al-Jarhi contributed in terms of institutional framework for monetary policy, Faridi and Salama developed the theory of fiscal policy, Matawalli macroeconomic analysis of fiscal policy, and Kahf developed a great contribution in the form of taxation. So these books, this material is available now on websites. Then comes the period of 1980s. Most of the material was started developing during 70s. In Pakistan, the President of Pakistan organized Council of Islamic Ideology under the chairmanship of Justice Tanzilur Rahman, who prepared a blueprint of Islamic finance for the economy of Pakistan. And then the implementation in Pakistan started during 1980s. And when I say Pakistan, the scholars were not working independent of rest of the world. It was a coordinated effort. Many seminars, many discussion sessions were held in Jeddah, and many scholars from Sudan participated in the discussions, and other parts of the world, Islamic world, participated in the development of the literature, and they contributed a lot in the preparation of blueprint material, seminar papers, books, and a lot of other material, and CDs as well. Now CDs are also available. So they developed a lot of material in the area of Islamic finance, which make huge component of fiscal and the monetary policy, which is the subject matter of our course. Development in the 1980s. Now what happened in 1980? 1980s was a period when another contribution was made in the area of Islamic financial, in the area of Islamic finance. At the conceptual level, Dr. Umar Chapra, the great economist, wrote his masterpiece with the title of Towards a Just Monetary System, 1985. And Dr. Ziauddin came up with the systematic inquiry into the public finance in Islam in 1989, IMF working paper. Other than above, mostly analytical works were produced in this period. Thus, effects of fiscal and or monetary policies are studied in the context of macroeconomic models, which I discussed earlier. Now you will understand why there is need to understand the macroeconomic models, why we spent quite good time on the discussion of the models. The models are very important. Some of these works are as follows. Now let me share with you the work Muhammad Mukhtar Mutawalli, M.M. Mutawalli, very well known, with the title of Macroeconomic Models of Islamic Doctrines, 1981. Second, Awsaf Ahmad, Income Determination in an Islamic Economy, 1984, published in 1987. Sayyid Tahir, A Sample of Aggregate Output, Income and Economic Inequalities. A sample of, I beg pardon, there's typographical mistake. A sample of aggregate output, income and economic inequalities, determination in an Islamic economy. So this is Islamic Economy, 1986, and published 1989. Continuing with the development during the 80s, let me share with you another great contribution of the scholar in the area of Islamic finance, Mohsin Khan, a big name in Islamic finance. Islamic Interest-Free Banking, a theoretical analysis, published in 1986. Mohsin Khan and Abbas Merakhor published another masterpiece in 1987 with the title of The Financial System and Monetary Policy in an Islamic Economy. Muhammad Anwar with the title of Modeling Interest-Free Economy, a Study in Macroeconomics and Development, published in 1987. Nadir Habibi, who contributed in terms of the consequences of Islamic banking in a macroeconomic framework, 1987, but published in 1991. Now, after having discussed the contribution of great scholars during the period of 70s and 80s, you can also find a lot of literature contributed by the Islamic scholars, by the Islamic economists during the 1990s. With increasing attention received by Islamic banking and finance in the 1990s, central banking, monetary management and monetary policy have received more attention from the Islamic economists. Some notable papers have been listed below. One, Mohsin Khan and Abbas Mirakhor, Monetary Management in an Islamic Economy, published in 1994. N. Chaudhry and Abbas Mirakhor, Indirect Instruments of Monetary Control, 1999. And continuing with the development of the 1990s, on the fiscal policy side, now this is the contribution made during 1990s in the framework of monetary policy, and because our second component of the course is fiscal policy, that is why I am sharing with you the development of the 1990s in terms of fiscal policy as well. Dear students, on the fiscal side, some work on taxation and implications of equity finance budgetary deficit for stability of the economy were explored very deeply. Muhammad Hussain, another great scholar and my teacher, God bless him, may he live long, he developed a macroeconomic taxation model for an Islamic economy, 1993. Ainul Hassan and Siddiqui with the title of Is Equity Financed Budgetary Deficit Stable in an Interest-Free Economy, 1996. Now it is noteworthy that in these and virtually all the analytical papers, the analysis is limited to the stabilization role of fiscal and the monetary policies. Almost all of these studies focused on these areas. The analytical part, they analyzed, and most of them compared the Islamic perspective with the conventional monetary and the fiscal policies, or conventional monetary and the fiscal setup and the framework. That is why, summing up, we can say all the papers, especially those written at the conceptual level, are silent on some fundamental matters, and these matters are Islamic economy, that is the framework in which the policies are to be conceived. The focus in the Islamic economics literature is on the Islamic economic system. So instead of Islamic economy, the focus is Islamic economic system. The nature and the role of government in Sharia. In the subsequent slides, I have covered this aspect as to the role of the government according to the Islamic Sharia. Then Sharia basis of the policy goals. Thus, Islamic economists are taking positions without a proper conceptual framework. Islamic economy, the nature and the role of the government, the institutional setup for the policies, so and so on. Moreover, Islamic economists are talking about policies for the Muslim countries. Scant attention is paid to Islamization of economy as a policy goal. I don't know why. Why Islamization of economy has not been seriously emphasized. Because if you have the policy framework, if you learn the parameters of fiscal and monetary policy in Islamic perspective, but if you don't have economy to implement, if you don't have the constitutional setup, constitutional structure to implement these policies, then there is less advantage of developing and framing the monetary and the fiscal policy in Islamic perspective. Another, elimination of poverty gets a passing mention as a policy objective. Dear students, just on lighter note, पॉवर्टी के ऊपर जितनी स्टडीज़ हुई हैं इस्लामिक पर्सपेक्टिव में, उसमें बहुत सारे लोगों को अमीर बना दिया है. मेरा मतलब ये है कि जिन लोगों ने इस एरिया में रिसर्च की है, स्टडीज़ की हैं, उनको प्रोजेक्ट्स मिले हैं, उन्होंने बहुत कमाया है. लेकिन वेरी अनफॉर्चुनेटली टू शेयर विद यू कि इस पॉवर्टी को इतना डीपली स्टडी करने के बावजूद, मिलियंस ऑफ रुपीस खर्च करने के बाद रिसर्च के ऊपर और पॉलिसी बनाने के ऊपर, पॉवर्टी में कमी नहीं आई. इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि इस्लामाइजेशन ऑफ द इकोनॉमी इज नीड ऑफ द टाइम. अगर हमारे पास कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क स्ट्रॉन्ग नहीं है, अगर हमारा सिस्टम ऑफ गवर्नेंस इतना इफ़ेक्टिव नहीं है, तो फिर हम इसी तरह बेशुमार मटेरियल डेवलप करते जाएंगे, हलाल हराम बताते जाएंगे, लेकिन उसको गवर्नेंस के प्रॉब्लम की वजह से सही तौर पर इम्प्लीमेंट या उससे मुस्तफ़ीद नहीं हो सकेंगे. Now, the remaining part of the lecture includes these 5 very important items. We will discuss the policy perspective, क्योंकि ये पीछे मैंने हाईलाइट किया है कि जितना एग्जिस्टिंग लिटरेचर है उसमें ये चीज़ें मिसिंग हैं या इतनी डिटेल से डिस्कस नहीं की गई. तो स्टूडेंट्स, आज के लेक्चर में हमने क्या डिस्कस किया? Let's see what we have discussed in today's lecture. In the start of the lecture, I introduced fiscal policy and monetary policy in Islamic perspective, and I introduce you the topics which we will cover in this course in very detail. This is a very lengthy course, but I will try to be very precise and concise in covering the most probable topics, the most important topics which are really important to understand the Islamic financial system and the Islamic fiscal system. Now, in this lecture, I also shared with you the background of studying this course. What is the background? The background is very simple. I shared with you this diagram. You see how the business cycles are fluctuating, how the business cycles are created, and why there is a need to study fiscal policy and monetary policy, and particularly the studying of fiscal policy and monetary policy is very pertinent. It is also pertinent with the perspective of the economy of Pakistan, because the economy of Pakistan Pakistan is named as Islamic Republic of Pakistan. So according to the Constitution of Pakistan, no clause of the Constitution can be made against the Islamic principles or the Islamic teachings. Well, keeping this aside, the most important thing for this course is to understand as to the basic tools of monetary policy, the basic tools of fiscal policy. So inshallah, initially in the subsequent lectures we will discuss in the initial lecture our focus will be on the monetary policy side and what are the traditional modes of finance in monetary policy, and after covering a couple of lectures we will move on to the fiscal policy. What are the basic tools of fiscal policy in conventional system and how the Islamic fiscal policy tools are different, what is added in the Islamic financial system in the fiscal policy perspective. So, well, I shared with you some experiences of the Islamic financial system, Islamic public finance, Islamic fiscal policy in different periods. The birth of Islamic economy in Pakistan practically is from 80s. In 1977, the working on the development of Islamic economic system started with the promulgation of an ordinance by the then President of Pakistan, and then there onward the working on the development of Islamic economic system and a blueprint of Islamic economic system was prepared, and then Zakat system was introduced. We will also focus, our focus will also be on the distribution of Zakat, on the implementation of Zakat system. I understand Zakat is not the only variable, it is not the single variable. Zakat is complete institution and we will consider Zakat as a institution in our framework. And I shared with you the literature which is available, and you can download this literature, you can Google this literature, you can understand the significance of this course. I shared with you the literature which was developed during the 80s, and these are the masterpieces contributed towards the Islamic economic and the Islamic banking and Islamic financial system. Then I shared with you the further development in this area. This is also pertinent to see. Some names are really marvelous. They have done marvelous thing while writing in the perspective of monetary and the fiscal policy. For example, Mohsin Khan, Abbas Mirakhor, and Dr. Nijatullah Siddiqui. These are the great economists in Islamic framework, and without understanding their contribution, I think it won't be possible to get through this course on fiscal policy and monetary policy in Islamic framework. Then some other retrospects I shared with you, and we close here, we stop here, and inshallah in the next lecture we will further proceed and I will share with you what is next, what is actually the requirement of this course and what further can be added. So thank you. Allah Hafiz.